Good morning. It's great to welcome you guys to our Idea Studio workshop series. And today we have a particularly terrific speaker for you, Dave Scholl, who has a very rich history in entrepreneurship and success and commercialization. Dave has served as the past president and CEO of Diagnostic Hybrids, which was created through Ohio University and still remains in Athens, Ohio, and took that and then ultimately took that company and ultimately sold that company. He has moved on as a venture capitalist, working on a variety of healthcare investment opportunities. He also is on the board of trustees of Ohio University. He has served 2 terms of the chairman of BioOhio, serving now as a commissioner on the Ohio Third Frontier Commission, and has been a founding member of the Ohio Business Development Coalition Board for Appalachia. Dave is really, to me, somebody who both really gets it at the level of actively being involved in company formation, but also gets the opportunity for the state of Ohio. And he is somebody who I think that we can look to here at Ohio State and in the state as a real visionary and pioneer to be able to help us create the right culture and the right systems to be able to create more value for the state of Ohio related to economic impact, but more importantly, as we talked about earlier, to really do good. Because our role here is to improve people's lives and create the future of medicine. And we can only do that if we take our best ideas and most talented people, including you guys sitting in the room, and we can translate that from good idea to real product or service that can change people's lives. And today we have the great benefit of having Dave talk to us about how he sees that happening and to give us a roadmap for the future. So Dave. Thank you. And his bio is on the back of the sheet. Oh, and one more thing if I can, sorry. I want to thank Brenda Akins for her organization of this, so thank you, Brenda. Awesome job as always. And just to let you guys know that we have a whole series of speakers, and although Dave is our best speaker ever, we do have a fireside conversation on September 12th with George Barrett, who is the chairman and CEO of Cardinal Health. So, Dave.
The small and the large. Well, thanks, Clay. I really appreciate the invite. And Brenda, thank you so much for organizing this. I look forward to, I was honored to get the call and always like to come to Ohio State. When I did, I come in red. All I have are green ties since I'm from Ohio University, so I went tieless today. But the topic of the title, I was debating about changing it, but I had spoken earlier about postdoctoral researchers and their attempt to train and become more entrepreneurially oriented. And so I thought I'd put out a shout out and keep the title. We're privileged to have Dr. Annette Ratcliffe here. Annette goes back a ways with Diagnostic Hybrids in Ohio University. She was an undergraduate at OU. She interned for us for 2 years. We sent her to Italy on a project to work with a laboratory in Italy, her one bridge year between there and Case Western. Got her PhD at Case Western, and she's now here as a postdoc, and she's trying to kind of look at opportunities of the postdoctoral group of folks in Ohio. You know, are we kind of not recognizing all that talent that's already been recruited to the state, probably on federal money, that we may not be connecting to industrial opportunities as well as we could be. So anyhow, I support, Annette, your efforts to kind of organize, and I think the bet would be there's 2,000 talented folks around the state that might benefit from your colleagues' efforts. So hopefully folks at Ohio State are kind of having a nice conversation with you and advancing some of that. Let's see, I guess, there we go. All right, so I call the DHI story persistence in motion. It's kind of like sometimes watching paint dry when you hear how long it's taken to do this. But I wanted to sum up really what the talk's going to be about to make sure that you, as you fell asleep throughout it, we can come back to this at the end. For us and for me, innovation and entrepreneurship drove the bus. I wanted to to do things that were kind of creative and novel wherever possible, and entrepreneurship, which to me is kind of a risk of failing. At that age, when I came back to Ohio University after a PhD there, I'll tell you a little bit of time I spent at Roche Institute for Molecular Biology, where they allowed you to, they talked about failure as part of the process. And so, anyhow, we continued to drive the operation that way. Partners were highly aligned to go the distance. You'll see that Ohio University was a major contributor philosophically, strategically, and financially. But I put an asterisk there because it's collaborative partners also. For some funny way, for some funny reason, the folks that we reached out to at universities across the country, and customers for that matter, really wanted us to succeed. And I think that was a really, you speak about the culture here in the state, it's a lot better when you're working with somebody on the other side that wants you to succeed, and you want to succeed, and it's a win-win, and it's hard to do sometimes. And it's particularly hard to do when you're tiny and small, and but we kind of turned that around, and we asked them to help us, and actually they were very, very willing to do it. Finding great people with appropriate talent was key to rapid growth. There's no question that this company, and the description of it was based on nearly 250 people at its peak prior to its sale to manage the company along the whole continuum of sales and marketing, regulatory, manufacturing, research and development. We had the whole thing. We didn't farm much out. We licensed technology in, but we never farmed anything out, and particularly the manufacturing, because it was a very difficult product to make, and we wanted to make sure we controlled it. Processes in place to capture value. Knowledge was property from day one, and I think it links back to innovation. We realized that patents were really, really critical to our downstream outcome, and so we patented wherever we felt appropriate. Strong research linked to strong commercial development. This, I think, was really kind of understated in many companies, but I link it to golf. I mean, you can have a great shot from the fairway, but if you miss the putt, it's still a bogey. In the summer of 2003, we had 100 full-time employees, 35 part-time employees, and most notably, we started a program with what's called Personnel Plus. We had a lot of packaging because of the manufacturing and the shipping that we did with FedEx. We actually have and still are, did become and still are one of FedEx's biggest overnight creators of enterprise because of the cell cultures having to get picked up in a very special way and delivered the next day. But anyhow, we had cleared a $5 million payroll. And we had 12 employees from the physically challenged group in Athens, and they had jobs on site working in the packaging department. If you look at the rapid growth, we were starting to look forward. I was getting a little bit more business savvy, certainly had a lot of advice, and they said, this looks pretty impressive. I mean, from 1999, you're under $2 million in sales. In 2003, you've taken it to $15.5 million in sales. But most importantly, there's $5 million of discretionary cash. EBITDA is the cash that you get to spend. And so when we saw that kind of ability, we started to invest a little bit into the R&D piece. And that's where we started to bring in some PhDs. Believe it or not, we were able to recruit the gentleman that invented Elvis, the blue cell line I talked about. He joined us from Washington University, St. Louis to be not only a medical director for us, but also a vice president of research. National recognition started to come. Inc. 500 spotted us. One year we were 200, the next year we were 100. And this is when it was 500. Now it's gone to 5,000. I need to put that out there. I thought it was a little bit more of a select audience at that time. But anyhow, these are the folks that were kind of partners with us. And we always wanted to highlight the partners and the community folks because we were smack dab in a small business, with a growing business that people didn't understand. Jobs coming, excitement happening. What are you guys? And so wherever we could bring the community folks, it gave everybody a little bit more comfort, I think. So anyhow, Doug Mitchell was with Personnel Plus, so he oversaw the physically challenged folks and that program. Jennifer Simon was the CEO of the local Chamber of Commerce. Linda Clark ran the incubator. And Jeff Morgan was a gentleman that we recruited from PricewaterhouseCoopers. He was tired of doing public accounting, and he wanted to get in the middle of a small, thriving business. And on the non-technical side, it was the single best decision I made, and I didn't make it. It was a connection from a board member to a person at PwC that knew he wanted to leave and wanted to make sure that he got into a good situation. So it was very helpful to have that network. So anyhow, the regional impact. In 2001 and 2003, those are actual numbers at the time, but I started to look down at 2010. how in the world, if this thing keeps going, are we going to fill the needs in Athens, Ohio for this capacity of people? We projected, I mean, with HR and an outside consultant, they said you're going to need 425 full-time people, 125 part-time people, the payroll is going to go to 25 million almost, et cetera, et cetera. But you can see the economic development impact this is having. And Clay and I talked about this also. In Columbus, this is nothing. But in Athens, we were the largest private employer at the end of the day, outside the school system and outside the university. And so you got to admit that when you're on something like that, it's simple to say, it's a big fish in a small pond, but it was a fun pond to be in because these were the kind of projections, and it was fun to help be part of creating it. If you looked at the actual skill level that we projected, advanced degrees, 91 of those folks, bachelor and associate's degrees, 400 of those folks, on and on. And I want to highlight the partnerships. We could do this. We could do this because we had a Ohio University. We had the two-year colleges in the region, Hocking College, Washington State, and we were starting to actually build connections and programs to the high schools to make sure that they knew we were the go-to place for a job. All right, so anyhow, if you look at the value creation relationship, it took $5 million to create DHI's first product in 1993, 5, that era, and a company conservatively valued at $24 million in 2003. How do we accelerate our growth? And the way we chose to do it was we were taking calls from the Inc. 500 story. Venture capitalists they're bright once they find you, and they're very hardworking, but they find you like everybody else does. With a little bit of news, you start getting on people's Richter scale, radars. So anyhow, we got on summits in Palo Alto and an office in Boston, and they, long story short, they put $10 million into the company. It was at a time where we didn't need the money, so it helped us negotiate fairly reasonable terms. You always want to be negotiating when you don't need the money, because I just think it's a better feel actually on the other side, and it certainly felt better on the management side. But anyhow, the goal was that money would take us to $100 million in sales by 2010. And if that were the case, conservatively, diagnostic companies would be valued at 2.5 times your sales. And actually, that's very conservative because I think it'd be more 3.5 to 4. But anyhow, what we were looking at in 2003 was an opportunity to try and build a $250 million exit value. We estimated the employees would be 500, and the best part of the whole thing was the early investor, Ohio University Foundation, owned a third of the company. So you can imagine how proud we all felt, a lot of OU folks sitting in this company, building value not only for themselves, but also for the university that they went to. And so anyhow, that drove a lot of our kind of hard work and persistence, I think, was this sense of doing something that had multiple outcomes in multiple food groups, so to speak. Not the least of which was the employees that made it happen. So anyhow, we moved up the capital ladder. And some of the partners joined us in 2004. What did it fuel? It fueled facilities expansion. So we moved out of the incubator finally, and we took a lease on 85,000 square foot on the opposite side of town. So we finally had made the step in 2007 or so to look like we were a community company. And it's really kind of a neat little business because McBee, the building we took over, total size was 220,000 square feet. It was one of the homegrown businesses in Athens called McBee Systems. McBee used to make forms for business transactions. And you can imagine what the internet did to that, or the opportunity for paper transactions to kind of go away. And so when we walked into that building, it was an example to me. Started in '64. They had not changed one iota to 2004. And as a result of that, I don't know if they could have solved it or not, but it felt like walking through Kodak, I think. It looked like a mausoleum to poor management, actually. Where did any innovation come from? The company was destined to kind of go up and go down. Anyhow, it was getting ready to be mothballed. It was mothballed, and it was getting ready to be torn down. And we came in and kind of saved it. And it was really kind of heartening because it was a building that kind of deserved to be alive and deserved to be in Athens, in my estimation. So with some support, financial, private, and public, we got the right loans and the right private money into a deal that allowed us to expand that. It grew our commercial sales and marketing to almost 20 sales reps across the country and internationally. We went ahead and built our R&D program up to 40 individuals. We did some more in-licensing of technology. We did a couple more company acquisitions, and it fueled a little bit of the international business. And at that point, we knew that at some time Summit would have to get out of the deal. And so we knew that that was the beginning towards a merger and acquisition or an IPO. The facility looks like this. We had reception, clean rooms, 2,000 square feet of clean rooms, all Class 100 air. Those have been expanded by Quidel since the merger, and they've actually taken over another 25,000 square foot of that building by closing plants in California and bringing them to Athens. Why? It's because the business environment in Athens and the skill level in Athens is appropriate for what they want to accomplish. And in the packaging and shipping. So it was really a nice opportunity for us to build our facility as we needed it to run the business. And then if you look at the accelerated growth, from 2004 on, the equity went in. We did the facility thing in 2007. We launched a whole battery of products in 2006. We had 2 major product launches in 2009, and we began to look at diversifying into the HIV area, and that was supported by, at the time, was a biomedical research and commercialization program grant out of the Department of Development for $5 million. And we put for a period of time, we had a facility in Cleveland on Euclid Avenue as they were trying to build their biomedical corridor. If you look at the summation of it, we were $5 million in the hole when we had our first product. We were generating $10 million of cash annually, and then we sold for $130 million. If you look at the national valuations over the course of 10, 11, and 12, DHI in Appalachia was irrelevant to the valuation that we received. And actually, I would argue that because it was small and because it was such a dedicated group, we probably drove a higher valuation. But if you look at the standards across the country, the price that was paid for DHI was right at the average for national mergers and acquisitions in Q1 of 2010. I talked about leadership. This was the group of board members that kind of drove the strategic oversight of management. There are representatives from Ohio University on here. The gentleman second and left on the front is Will Conacher, who is now 91 years old. He had some stock in the company. He basically gifted it back to the university when it was done, and it was about $10 million of gift that has gone into a significant amount of scholarships and some other things. So kind of hoping to return. Some of it's going into entrepreneurship. Roger Latzenhauser is the third face on the right. He was a gentleman that we met in 1994 from Voorhees, Sater, Seymour, and Pease, who came up and said, "You need some help." And I said, "Well, do you mean that kindly?" Or he said, "Yeah, actually." He says, "I think you've got something going here, but you need some legal help." So for about 2 years, he didn't charge me a penny. And I'll never forget the fact that, number one, I learned that people did that. And secondly, for good reason, because we spent a lot of money with him when we got successful. But more importantly, he developed a relationship with me and my senior management team that absolutely was crucial to personal and professional success. Whenever we had a question, he knew us, and I think that's very important. The accounting side was the same way. The gentleman kind of next to Roger in the blue tie in the back is Tim Biro. Tim is a venture capitalist out of Cleveland, Ohio, that probably had far more faith in us than we deserve to have, and he helped fund some of the company when it was pretty lean, and was on the board to the end. And then we've got next to Tim, we've got the 2 guys from Summit Partners. They always marry a senior guy with a junior guy on all their board representation, because it's a wonderful succession plan they actually orchestrate, where the guy above Will is now one of the top 4 people in all of Summit, and the gentleman next to him is now a partner in Summit. I mean, it's really a great system by which the financial world tries to advance folks that are doing well. And when I come back to what Clay had mentioned, in 2004, not only did we do the core value thing, but I thought we came up with an effective logo for our company. We were always running. We were always racing ahead. We were always looking forward. It was always about people. And the integrating science and humanity, to me, just really captured what we tried to accomplish on a daily basis. So, accelerating commercial success across Ohio. I know that some folks wanted, the topic was intended to be, what's available. And I can only speak about the Third Frontier. I've been a Third Frontier commissioner for a couple of years, and they've made some substantial investments in several different ways. But just for the folks that don't know, It's a historic, I think, voter-approved bond issue that the state did in 2002. It provided $1.35 billion of money for a 10-year period, and then got re-upped in 2010 to add another $700 million. So, I mean, it's a $2 billion investment by state administration, government, to drive targeted industry areas through entrepreneurship, capital formation, talent recruitment, into technology businesses that are associated with those 8 or 9 industrial targets. And of course, that industry target list is based on the fact that we are good in Ohio at certain things and perhaps not so good at others. And so that's how the list got generated. If you look at the financial resources, they're significant. In FY12, I think the budget to be spent that year was $225 million, and then on through the rest of the funding. Generally, it's tied to what I said, entrepreneurial support, developing the value chain. When I talk about the value chain or supply chain, I'm speaking about, for example, a pharma company that comes into the state and basically says, I'm going to take my money and do clinical trials in Michigan, or do clinical trials in California, or I'm going to use do toxicology studies in Wisconsin. There are opportunities for all of that to probably get done in the state of Ohio if everybody is connected. And if the talent in all of those groups, whether it be patient recruitment and enrollment and oversight in our institutions is adequate, which it clearly has to be. And secondly, relative to the service organizations, can they meet the needs of pharma? And can we develop those relationships between inventors, entrepreneurs, and companies that are developing in that space to link to them? Because if we don't link to them, to me, that's where the job sustainability happens, in companies that are already existing and letting them grow. I mean, a company, for example, you saw the growth rate. Investing in a company that's got 100 employees trying to get to 250, do I do that investment where it's a net 150 and strengthens that kind of cultural cluster? Or do I go ahead and start up 50 new one-person companies? It's always a conundrum. You got to do both, I think. You got to figure out mechanisms and tactics for both. So anyhow, the intentionality part comes from this commercialization framework that was adopted, I suspect, 8 to 10 years ago by the Department of Development here. And it talks about the stages of bringing a company from idea all the way into startup, into getting its products demonstrated that it works, into market entry, and into the growth and sustainability. And if I've done nothing else, I hope that Diagnostic Hybrids gives you that kind of sense that all those rings had to be a bit of the process. I mean, it's the way it works. And then the key for growth is, can you kind of run through multiple times? So anyhow, the programs that support this commercialization framework are multiple. There's 11 different ones. They range from the left side of the framework to the right side, meaning that the left side would be much higher risk, one would think, than once you get out into the marketplace and customers start to see uptake, the money that's going into the right side of that framework would be much less at risk. But believe me, there's risk in every one of those circles, no question about it. And obviously, as you come through the risk of trying to get the product out in ring 3 or 4, you run into your competitive risk because you're not the only one out there doing stuff that's attractive to customers. So that's the $225 million in these kinds of programs. Some of them are university focused, some of them are entrepreneur focused, some of them are big center grants. There's a multi-dimensional strategy that's in play here. There's a lot of debate how well it's working, a lot of debate as to what it's yielding. My view of the world is that I have a vested interest because I help vote where the money goes. I think there are some programs that are doing exceedingly well, and some yet school is out on. The ones that I think are doing really well are the, let's see. I think these are good ones. The research incentives and the tech validation and startups are trying to funnel money of $50,000 to $100,000 grants into primarily university opportunities for faculty to kind of get out of your comfort zone a bit and jump into the commercial world where the diligence is different than a publication. That's a bit of a risky business for a faculty member to take that step. The state is trying to support it. I know universities across the state have different views of it. All of them positive, but their execution on it are different. Some probably are better at it than others. But I think those are important programs from on an academic institution basis. And then the ESP and the pre-seed funds down below, that's probably about $150 or $200 million that's been spent over 5 or 6 years to take regions of the state and put venture capital at remember the ladder? Down at the bottom, above family and friends, but that next stage of investment capital where it's very, very risky and you've got to give incentives for folks to kind of play the game with you. These funds that are in these seed funds are about a 50-50 match. So the most impressive metric that I see across the state in these seed funds being productive is that if you look at them from 2008 to 2010 to 2014, the regions are beginning to get high net worth individuals to play the game with them. And so therefore, that's where those matching dollars are coming from. And there's not too many high net worth individuals that are going to put money down a rat hole without the belief that they're going to get a return on the investment. I think that's a very powerful statement when you see private money coming on the back of public money and it growing. The trend is more people want to be part of it. And I think that's very, very exciting. And I do believe that if that happens, the people that deserve the most credit for making that happen are the people that are running the regional funds, that are doing the diligence and making the picks. So OTF Capital is kind of, there's a number of ways that the OTF Capital plays, but it's primarily in those growth grants or seed funds. And there's a debate right now as to whether or not there should be more funding going into more mature institutional investors in the state. And if you look at whether the OTF is helping, I use the pre-seed funds and the ESPs as the best data for it. If you look at dollars and job creation that's coming from the amount of money the taxpayers' money is providing, it looks like about 50% of the impact of the metrics we monitor are coming from these specific programs, whether it be job creation or follow-on funding or sales, out of the company. So it's probably about 15% of the spend, generating about 50% of the impact, if the metrics are correct. All right, so in summary, was the original vision Ohio University accomplished with DHI? Well, we did create higher paying, sustainable jobs in rural Southeast Ohio. Our average payroll was probably about $65,000, and the total payroll is $10 million. When it came to enhancing the research image of the university, I say no, we did it, but we also we were a mechanism by which to attract the top scientists out of NIH to come to the university. Controllable revenue streams through technology commercialization efforts. The startups, Ohio University Foundation, played a huge role, and then also paid out royalties through licensing activities is a big thing on our campus. DHI had actually paid royalties, but there was a drug developed that has probably put in about $100 million in the last 4 or 5 years from the development of a drug that Pfizer is selling from a university faculty member. Assistant faculty recruitment, we had a number of spouses of folks that they were recruiting to the university that had PhDs or were molecular biologists or marketing people that we could bring into the company. And so we worked really, really closely with Ohio University's HR department. And when they had a hot one on the list, we were called. It was kind of like a rare disease of sorts. If something happens, you get a call. A rare disease in a good way, just the frequency of it. Provide the real-world educational opportunities for students. Obviously, our attempt to work with Annette, we affiliated ourselves with what's called the Cutler Scholars Program. It's a fully funded, 100% paid for scholarship that the third year of the internship, the third year of schooling, has an internship that the scholarship pays for that says you need to go out and do an entrepreneurial internship. And so we saw about 15 of those kids. And the deal we had with them is if you stay for the second year, we will try to also find you a spot internationally to work with one of our collaborators. It worked really, really well. And it was probably some of the best work Annette's ever done. Is the original vision Ohio accomplished with OTF? I think innovation and entrepreneurship has proven to be a significant engine of economic development and wealth creation across the globe and certainly in Ohio. Information technology and healthcare opportunities are rapidly advancing, I think, as opportunities to look at investing in. The better infrastructure exists in each region. Many are engaged, and I really mean the high net worth piece because I think it's an indicator that says that some things are working within some of the areas. As a scientist or student or postdoc, your research does matter. Your discoveries may have commercial potential. You need to start putting that up high on the list when you're kind of pursuing things, I think. And you've got a technology and commercialization office here that can help you. You certainly got a wonderful infrastructure. I think that's happened over the past 10 years, is that there's been a big recognition and investment in helping faculty. And I think students should consider themselves in this pari passu with faculty members. If you've got a great idea and you're an entrepreneur and you're an inventor, it doesn't matter that you don't have faculty status. There should be a sensitive cohort on campus that wants to see you almost like a tenured faculty person, as long as you've got a great idea. And then lastly, not everybody's built to be an entrepreneur. It's an amazing amount of work, risk. It's hard to do when you've got 4 kids and you're in the middle of a career to kind of just ditch it and decide you're going to do it. It didn't happen for me. I got it early, and we kind of kept going. But oftentimes you wonder, is it a big company you want to go into, or is it a startup? It's a totally different game. And not everybody's built for large in the biomedical, large biotech or large business either. And then you could also license. I mean, licensing is not a bad way to go. It's a little bit risk reducing, but the journey is a lot different. So anyhow, thank you. This is my favorite shot of Ohio University. It's kind of from the hillside over the west campus, and it always looks like this, whether it's winter or summer or spring or fall. So anyhow, I've got 3 questions that were asked ahead of time, and I think I have an open book opportunity to answer. If I can ask 3 real quick questions.
I have them right here.
You have them? Okay.
I have them.
I hope you got them in the same order. Oh, good. Okay. All right, so let me give you the 3 questions. What are the best ways that an organization like OSU, Wexner Medical Center should do to support researchers and inventors to become successful in tech commercialization? That was a Wexner question. The other one is, what is your overall impression of the Central Ohio startup ecosystem? What steps are needed to move it forward? And then what sacrifice did you make when starting a company that you wish you had not made later in life? Would you do anything differently if you had known then what you know now? So those are great questions. So I'm going to use some notes to address them. One is on the Wexner side. I think that there's an educational support infrastructure that I think that's got to be put in play, and I think it really leads to kind of a mentoring, an opportunity to gain mentoring, and I think that's not from the academics and not necessarily from the business school as much as from mentors that you could actually bring in that have maybe done it, and some business folks that have that can provide maybe a more objective diligence on the person's idea and what the future holds if you do decide to kind of pursue this. And then I think, reward research that focuses on commercial potential. When we started this back in the mid-'80s, the question was publish or perish kind of mentality, and the promotion and tenure folks never gave any validity to the fact that you had launched a product or had a patent. I think that's evolved quite a bit over the years, but I think that the incentives there, you'll get what you incentivize. And so if there's a promotion and tenure that has nothing to do with commercialization in it, or no way to put it in there, I don't know if faculty can afford to take that risk. They're going to be going down a different path. Relative to leadership from on top, we talked about this. Ohio University is a small university relative to this place. It was easy, and it was at a time when a new president was coming on trying to be innovative and creative. And when he told the deans this was going to work, all of a sudden people owned it. And then the foundation got on board, which is the arm of the university. So it seemed to be a nice, tight network of people that really mattered to help us out. Finance them. Give them money. Get vested, right? When you put money into it like they did in us, it's kind of like when you had an employee, you wanted them to buy the biggest house they could find. They had to work, right? They didn't want to lose their job. It works that way. When the university came in, they weren't going to let us die for no good reason because they'd throw their money away. And so they became more patient than they should have been, quite frankly, and for longer term. In the context of a university trying to create this culture, it's generational. It's 20 years. I used to always be concerned about how long it took us, but I start with 1995, and then I don't feel so bad. I call it a development company, and then when we had our first product, to fire me or fire us at that time where we were just ready to kind of come out of the J curve and go forward would have been kind of resetting the clock. Unfortunately, I didn't have that kind of pressure on me. But I think the powers that be have got to kind of decide on what it is they're going to go after and then continue to go after it, and not maybe polish it a little bit, but continue to support it. Partner with the ecosystem around you. There are assets that are here now that weren't there 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or certainly not 20 years ago. Tech Columbus is a good one we've talked about. There's always going to be partnering issues. But I think for the most part, when you do the dive into the ecosystem, I think there's more benefit than disbenefit. And then celebrate successes. Not all are going to work for sure, but you've got to figure out a way to, I think, link it to something humanistic. I think people get too centered on making money when it generally doesn't happen, actually, and setting people up in a certain kind of stratosphere that others don't receive the attention. I think you got to kind of deflect that a little bit, but you got to celebrate those people that do come out of that shell and decide to take the risk to go forward. And so how you do that, I'm not 100% sure, but marketing school can help you with that, I think. And certainly there's enough history out there on what works for incubators and how they bring these people in and how they celebrate them. But you got to celebrate. It's just too hard. All right, so on the ecosystem, Central Ohio, I know that it's undergone some strategic shifting. There's been a new person from Oklahoma, Tom Walker, who's kind of taken over the reins. So there's new leadership. I'm, in the few meetings I've had with Tom, I'm favorably impressed with kind of how he's trying to take the Tech Columbus and the ecosystem down a path of commercialization, streamline activities, I think it would be a good word to use. And I think he's focused on the commercialization. He's focused on the results, I think. He's trying to reach out to the high net worth individual groups and the larger companies to kind of get them to embrace this phase of economic development, job creation. I think in Cincinnati, that wasn't the question. But one thing that's really impressed me is how Kroger's and Procter & Gamble and those folks have basically committed funds and expertise to part of the ecosystem, because they had McKinsey come in and say, hey, we think there's some gaps here and we think we can fill them if we now get engaged. If we'd have done this 10 years ago, there wasn't enough ecosystem there to help. They would have been the ecosystem. But when they saw that it had kind of formed and they could actually touch and feel some of it and account for it, they jumped in. And what does Kroger's have to do with venture capital and small business startups? Well, Cincinnati is a big consumer kind of oriented town and a branding town. And so what they're trying to do is leverage off that expertise, and they're giving direct engagement with big companies. Do you remember the Quest LabCorp story I told you? They would tell me what their needs were. I didn't have to hire a consultant to kind of filter it. We could show them things. Well, I don't want that. Oh, that looks pretty good. Kroger's, Macy's, and Procter & Gamble are letting entrepreneurs come right in their business development rooms, and their business development people are saying, I got these problems. Can your technology help me solve it? It's kind of like a first customer piece that I think is pretty attractive. And it builds a community culture that I know Clay's talked about a lot, it's a big business culture. In Cardinal and in all the other shops here, but Battelle's not so much a commercial business, but you've got so many assets here that if they're ushered in the proper direction, I think it'd be a really great resource. And they are on many, I see them on many OTF grants. Okay, so me. The question about sacrifice. I wouldn't characterize it as sacrifice because things worked out, so to speak. But I often use a phrase that talks a little bit about this. And I used to always say, on a good day, we were persistent. On a bad day, we were stupid. You know, they're kind of kissing cousins, that depending on who's looking at it. There was a long time there where my wife and kids thought I was a little stupid, because we just weren't growing very fast in the dream that we talked about. So the sacrifice occurs with the family. And that's a key part of this entrepreneur. Everybody's an entrepreneur. Go to class, read persistence, read hard work, you gotta live it and breathe it. And the people that really do sacrifice are their families, wives, spouses, girlfriends, and kids. The real benefit to me, I never looked at it as a risk. I was a technical guy trying to model off of Will Conacher, who was a great business guy, and I thought, how in the heck does he do this? And I think he did it probably faster than I did it, but he does it because you get to experience it and you get to go on the journey. And you get to actually make mistakes. I made tons of mistakes. But we look at them and say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? I think I sharpened it as I went along. And ultimately, I think the biggest point of pride for the management team, and certainly the early people that were there at the beginning, was we had 65 employees have stock options in the company. And the best story I love to tell is our 10th employee came in, minimum wage job. At that time, we were paying $7 an hour. She was a shoe salesperson in Lancaster. and she'd heard about this job, and she came down, very kind of, I'm not technically oriented, blah, blah, blah. We'll work with you. This will work out. Anyhow, she stayed with us 17 years, and she had stock options from the beginning. And so the day before we were going to do this company merger, we felt obligated to kind of sit with her and tell her she had a big tax problem coming. And so anyhow, it was really fun to watch the employees realize, what capital gains. It was a whole educational process that they needed to hear about. That I think is normal conversation in Silicon Valley. It's normal conversation in San Diego, Chicago, Boston, Austin. It was really fun to do that in Appalachia. So anyhow, not a sacrifice to me. And one last comment, and that is believe in yourself. In 2008, any of the wealth that anybody had, for the most part, was sitting in paper stock. It was in the stock that they'd had for many, many years. Well, 2008 in October, if we had sold the company in September of 2008, the next month it would have dropped by 50%. Because the first thing I would have done, or anybody would have done, was give it to a wealth manager and they'd have put it in the stock market. I was so grateful that we didn't sell the company in September of 2008 and that we just continue to believe in it. So all I'm saying is we always view, as an entrepreneur, that opportunity as a second paycheck to be a meaningful piece of it. Nobody but yourself and the people around you will ever believe it'll be of any value, but it's the reason you go to work. It's funny how that works. That this worthless piece of paper is the reason that I believe in 10 years, my efforts, my hard work will mean something to that piece of it. And then all of a sudden the sacrifice seems to dissolve a bit. So anyhow, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's, we're about at time, but I'd be happy to entertain a question or two. And maybe Carol, I'd love to have your comments about Carolyn Whitaker, who's the Vice President of Research at the university, about sort of our efforts around commercialization and some of the moves that you've made as part of moving this ecosystem forward.
Well, I'd just like to thank Dave. Dave and I have known each other many, many years.
We have.
And it's really fun to see all of this put together. I don't think I've ever heard the story from start to finish before, and it's really terrific to actually hear that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing it with us. I would just say that we've actually, I think, done a lot in commercialization in the last 3 or 4 years. We really invested a lot in the kind of the end of the process, in the, kind of in the tech commercialization efforts under first Brian Cummings and now Tim Wright. And so, but I think there's a subtle change that's actually happening at the institution because, and I'm talking about Ohio State here, in that we've had sort of this industry liaison piece that has been pretty strong for quite a while. I mean, we were second, third in the country in industry-sponsored research. A lot of that's clinical trials, a lot of that's engineering, but what we're seeing now is that, but that was disconnected from commercialization. And so what we're seeing now, though, is that there's a coming together at a big place like this where you have commercialization talking much more and working together with industry liaison, working with sponsored research, working with advancement, and actually career services. So I think so when we look at a company that wants access to our students, it's not that easy anymore. So there must be an investment in Ohio State in order to gain access to those students. So we've connected all the pieces, I think, at this point, and I would really credit Dan Kramer with doing that. And so I think that's a little bit ahead of some other institutions that are out there, but I think, I just really credit you, Dave, with sort of doing all of it, from research to industry to commercialization, and I think you sort of put it all together 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
So.
thanks, Carl. In talking to Clay, we thought that we always had an advantage being out of the mainstream, down in Athens, not very distracted, just focused on trying to put all the pieces together efficiently and quickly. It just seems so easy to do it. And my message would be, is there a way to be big for the advantages that big brings, but somehow privatize it or smallize it or something to the group? In some ways, not everybody wants to partake. It's almost like a portfolio. If you look at all the people that might come into the fold, maybe it's not for everybody, and maybe, but there is a select group of folks that you really target, whether they be student-oriented or faculty-oriented, to kind of build those opportunities. I wonder, in a rich place, volume-wise, like Ohio State, about the student pool. The students on this campus have got to be the next famous inventor. You know what I mean? They're walking on this campus, and I'd just be curious to know how. We always battle at Ohio University. How do we find the next Bob Walter at Ohio University? How do we get that kid who's going to become that? How can we nurture that sooner? and here you've got such a magnitude of it happening in so many different disciplines. But anyhow, credit to you to be trying to tackle such a large problem. And I'm excited by what I see here with the idea story. I mean, at BioOhio, didn't we have Clay come? And you gave one of the best talks on personalized medicine.
No, thanks.
It just, but the day we heard it wasn't the day that you saw commercial outcomes.
Right.
You were predicting the future. And the question is how do we make Ohio that kind of hub for that? Because that's what's going to happen, right? So I don't know, making it happen, seeing what needs to happen and making it happen is two different things. And I applaud people that are in such large organizations trying to, you're like in an IBM kind of mentality, real big versus the smaller guy that can move faster. But, and I will share this. I got to tell this funny story. I think it's funny. I was at the Hampton Inn with the Board of Trustees in Columbus, and it's like 11 o'clock, and I turn on the TV, and I'm looking for SportsCenter. I'm fantasy baseball. I got to figure out who my guys are, how they're doing, and who pops up but Dr. Whitaker giving the address on TV for the recognition and the awards, I think, the Innovation Awards for the year. And I watched it, and the reason I watched it was two reasons. One, I knew the presenter, and so it was very credible. Secondly, is I was amazed at how you went from A to Z within this university. Literally, I think there's technology on the Z side and some on the A side, and you covered such an expansive amount of technology at this place that I just was mesmerized by how much you had to say about all these different things and how many premier faculty are here. So and one of them just got, I think, the vote of confidence from the Third Frontier, Dr. Rezai. That's a big bet. And how does it marshal the economic development? How does it become that catalyst for Ohio State to get an example of how to do something magnificent? That's going to be really cool to watch that evolve.
Thank you very much for coming, and please come up and ask Dave questions individually. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clay.